And before we get started, I'll ask our Jessica to read the hybrid meeting ground rules and then call the roll.
Okay. Tonight's meeting will be held in person with a virtual meeting component. If you are participating virtually, please make sure the name shown at the bottom of your video view is the name you would like the mayor to use. You can change this by right-clicking on the three dots in the upper corner of your video view and clicking Rename. Audience members present in the council chambers will be called upon first during public comment periods. Those participating remotely should virtually raise your hand if you wish to speak. To virtually raise your hand, click on participants and then click on the raise hand, sorry. If you are participating by phone only, press *9 to raise your hand. Please limit comments to 3 minutes.
Roll call. Here.
Richard Bloom.
Here.
Fred Brink.
Here.
David Fetto.
Here.
May Hayes. Here. Kate Moran. Present. John Smart.
Here.
Ken Stoker asked to be excused.
A motion to excuse Councilmember Stoker this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Motion in 3 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you, council. Appreciate that. Thank you, Jessica. So that moves us to the consent agenda this evening, which is a motion to award the Keene and Kennedy Striping Fog Seal Improvements Project. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this agenda item this evening? Seeing no one in house, I'll ask if there's anybody virtually who would like to speak to this agenda item this evening. *9 by phone or raise your virtual hand. Jessica, I do not see anybody online with hand up or *9. Do you?
I do not.
With that, council may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, council. So that moves us to ordinances, resolutions, motions, and public hearings. Item 4A and 4B are a public hearing and a motion regarding the preferred alternative for the Lewis and Clark Ranch draft environmental impact statement. And I'll have Community Development Director Eric Mendenhall presenting staff report this evening. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members in the community. So before you this evening is the preferred alternative. We are asking for your approval of a preferred alternative. I'm going to turn some time over to Casey Bradfield. She's attending online. She's going to go through a PowerPoint presentation and share with you some background just to help get everybody up to speed and remind everyone the process that we've gone through and where we're at. And then she'll turn the time back over to me to close it out.
Casey, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Nice to see you, council members. Give me a moment to share my screen here. Let's see. Okay, is everyone seeing the slides all right?
Yep, we got it, Casey.
Great.
We've got, let's see. You got one on your screen? We got probably every other?
Every other.
Okay, everybody's gonna have to powwow around one.
It's still shared.
Okay. Very good.
Am I good? Okay. So I just spoke with you all in the Planning Commission last month about this same topic, and glad to be back again today. Just as a recap, this is a key decision point for the project. We published the draft environmental impact statement, otherwise known as an EIS, on July 3rd, which represented a lot of analysis and work that was done over the past few years on the applicant's proposal to change land use designations in the Lewis and Clark Ranch. There was a 30-day comment period that closed on August 4th. And now we move forward with preparing the final EIS. And to do that, the city needs to make a decision on a preferred alternative that will be studied in the EIS and will also be the basis for the sub-area plan and implementation of that plan. So we talked about initial recommendations for that preferred alternative at that July joint working session with the Planning Commission and City Council. We have incorporated input that we heard from you at that work session. We've also worked in collaboration with the property owner to develop the recommendation. And we have additionally reviewed comments that were received on the draft EIS. So on July 30th, the Planning Commission also held a public hearing and passed the recommended preferred alternative for the City Council to approve as proposed. Want to note that there was only one person that spoke during that public comment period during the hearing, and that was the property owner speaking in favor of the recommendation. To review, the preferred alternative that will be in the final EIS needs to be within the range of the alternatives that were studied in the draft EIS. It can be one of the three that was already studied in the draft, or it can be a hybrid that is within the range of what was studied. I'm going to quickly review with you the three that were in the draft EIS. I know you've seen these slides before, so I will keep it high level and we can answer any follow-up questions if folks would like to discuss anything in more detail. But under the state law for preparing EISs, you always need to look at a no action alternative, which is what we're calling alternative 1, which means you don't do anything, you just keep your current plans and zoning in place. So this image is the city's current zoning, and you can see the ranch area outlined in this maroon color in the top left. And under current zoning, the majority of the ranch is under urban transition zoning, meaning it's sort of being held for future growth and can't be developed at an urban scale right now. And a portion of the ranch does have urban type zoning applied to it for a mix of housing uses and commercial uses. However, development in there is limited by the fact that the city's current water and sewer retail service area doesn't extend there. So here is alternative 2 from the draft EIS. This is what the applicant proposed for new zoning for the ranch. So we see that zoning designations have been applied to the full sub-area, which provides more predictability for long-term planning and allows us to have a coordinated land use strategy that would be built out over time. Some key things to note here are this alternative would use the city's existing zoning designations with the exception of a new mixed-use designation. There would be commercial nodes and corridors surrounded by a mix of residential zones. There would also be light industrial zone here and a network of parks. And then alternative 3 from the draft EIS is also required under state law that the city come up with a reasonable alternative to what the applicant proposed that would somehow have lower environmental impacts. And this is that proposal that the city developed through a public scoping and charrette process. So there's a lot of similarities in terms of the types of land uses that would be allowed. The differences are primarily in terms of urban design and the street network. Any questions there before I move on to the preferred alternative recommendation?
Council, do you have any questions of Casey? Seeing none, go ahead, Casey.
Okay. So we do recommend a hybrid preferred alternative based most closely on alternative 3, that reasonable alternative that the city developed and that we coordinated with the property owner on. So we found that alternative 3 provided a good overall approach to accomplishing project goals and limiting environmental impacts, but it could be strengthened to address some things that we learned through the process. The property owner requested a change to the areas designated for light industrial, given some recent market trends. There's evolving state guidance on habitat mitigation and updated information on city plans for providing transportation and utility services that we've addressed with our recommendation. We have also done some fine-tuning of the land use designations to ensure they are consistent with planned growth and level of service standards. And we also adjusted the phase one boundary so that it aligns with utility service basins, parcel boundaries, and transportation improvement plans. So there's a lot of words on this slide, and I'm going to try and hit the high notes for you. I think this information is also in the memo that you were provided. But in terms of land use for the recommended preferred alternative, we would be redesignating the land uses in the ranch and coming up with primarily new land use and zoning designations. For urban design, we'd be supporting urban design that's based on traditional neighborhood principles described in the draft EIS pattern language. This does include adopting a new code to guide development in the sub-area. I want to note that that code would be reviewed by the city this fall. The preferred alternative supports it, but you would be reviewing that separately than the decision tonight. In terms of growth within phase one, which is the area where the city anticipates growth happening over the next 20 years, I'm going to use round numbers here and say the plan is to accommodate about 2,700 jobs and 3,800 housing units in a phase one area that is about 770 acres in the bottom left corner of the ranch. The full sub area is not expected to build out until 50 to 100 plus years over the long term. And based on the land use designations we're recommending, that would allow for about 20,000 jobs and about 32,000 housing units. It's important to note that full build out of the sub area would require additional water rights. For transportation, we're recommending a grid street network as well as new streets cross sections shown in the draft EIS Appendix M. This would support the city in developing a multimodal 15-minute city and also 5-minute neighborhoods with destinations within short distance of residents. For utilities and public services, the plan is to extend them to serve growth in phases, starting with phase one, and ensure that they're provided consistent with adopted level of service standards. And for parks, we would be creating a network of parks and open spaces, also consistent with level of service standards. And the new code would likely provide some options for providing additional park space within walking distance of residences if provided as part of private developments. So a few key terms when we're talking about the phased growth. So phase one, this is really where we're focused in the most detail. It's where we anticipate growth will happen over the next 20 years, which is the same period of time that the city's doing comprehensive planning for. We have been talking with Public Works a lot about this project, and they're working in partnership with the property owner to extend water and sewer service in this area, which will require a number of infrastructure improvements. The city also is intending to adopt a planned action ordinance that would just apply to this phase one area. This would allow streamlined permitting. So if a development proposal came in and they said, we're going to follow all the mitigation that it's in this planned action ordinance for this phase one area, it could be approved without having to do its own SEPA process. Outside of that phase one area, if a project came in that was determined by the city to likely have significant environmental impacts, they would have to do additional SEPA review. Okay. So the reasonable alternative was our starting point for the preferred alternative. And I just want to define for you all what the colors on the map are here. So the red color is a mixed-use commercial core area. So primarily commercial uses, retail, office, also some housing mixed in, but primarily commercial. The orange color is a transition going down from that high-density commercial to residential, and it has a mix of both commercial and housing uses. The yellow color is residential only, and that would include single-family detached as well as some moderate density like townhomes and duplexes, for instance. This purple color is mixed use light industrial, and then the green would be parks and open space. So we shared this slide with you on July 22nd, showing some of the changes we were planning to make between the reasonable alternative and our recommended preferred alternative for the final EIS. And some of the big changes for phase one were to move the light industrial uses out of phase one and replace that with a mix of homes and jobs generating uses. And we also made refinements to the road network and the park layout to better align with the Bluffs plan development, the site topography, and road intersections. Let's see. So here is our final recommended phase one map the Planning Commission reviewed. Wanted to highlight here, we did realign the park space so that we reduced the frontage along arterials, and that was based on feedback that we heard from you all and also Public Works that this would be better for public safety in the community, but we're still preserving some areas along arterials where there could be parking and access. Eric, is there anything you'd like to highlight about the phase one land use plan and transportation network?
Just to point out that there is there's quite a bit of reduction in that park area based from the reasonable alternative to this alternative. And we had a lot of conversation at the CD subcommittee about this last night. But what you see here is there is a 50-foot wide effective park and trail that would connect those parks together and then take that out towards Twin Bridges, so that there's that nice feature that's built within there. And you do see the other trail connections that would be able to bring people together and connect them to the park system and other services and needs that they may have within the system without having to jump into a car to get there. They could get on a bike or walk. So definitely looking at multimodal transportation options within the plan.
Casey, back to you.
All right. In terms of the full sub area that would be built out over the longer term, this is the slide we shared with you on the 22nd, talking about some of the big changes. And that included moving the light industrial that was up here down to this edge next to the other light industrial district and expanding that total acreage a bit. And we also, through the draft GIS analysis and reviewing the comments on the draft GIS, saw that this area here, we needed to probably do more to limit development there based on habitat and geohazards. We also took a look at the acreage required in this area, which is a possible future site that could be for the waste transfer station and new sewage treatment plant. So here is our updated recommended full sub area map. You can see those changes made that I was just talking about, and want to note that the total amount of light industrial acreage increased, and that is the reason why you're seeing fewer red nodes on the map. Both of those uses, light industrial and commercial, generate jobs, and we needed to have total jobs growth within the range of what we had studied in the draft GIS. So we shrunk down those other land use designations as a result, but we still are preserving those a network of commercial nodes and corridors here. And I want to point out that in the orange land use designation, there would still be allowed to have shops and some office uses. Another key change, before I move on, I wanted to mention that in the work session, we did hear feedback that we had too much commercial along the bluff. So we removed almost all of that based on feedback as part of adjusting the land use designations. Another key change you'll see on this map is instead of a large area designated as park, we have an overlay of possible critical areas. So we know based on the analysis that was done for the draft GIS that there are likely some habitat areas in there that the city may want to conserve in the future. But there's some changing state guidance that the city's going to be looking at as part of the upcoming comprehensive plan update. And there's no significant critical areas identified in phase one. So the approach, and Eric, you can speak to this more, that the city staff are recommending is to wait to address what land might need to be conserved as critical areas in future planning phases, and just to designate areas where that may apply in the future.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, thank you, Casey. This plan is a 100+ year plan. When you look at the whole entire site, 7,700 acres approximately, and just phase one is going to take 20 years approximately to build that area out, depending on market or circumstances. So as you start to roll out that acreage across it, we don't know what the requirements are going to be for land use conservation when it comes to habitat or other critical areas. And so rather than identifying that and limiting it at this point, we just want to leave it as is. And in the future phases, as those get planned, they can address those as they approach and cross those lines.
Thank you, Eric. And just want to emphasize again, the planned action ordinance that we're proposing would just apply to this phase one area. So any big project out in this area that was proposed would need to do its own SEPA review. This table has a lot of detail. It's also in the memo in your packet. It compares the different alternatives that were in the draft EIS with the recommended preferred alternative. I think we've covered a lot of the information in here already, but I do want to point out, in terms of planned growth, the recommended preferred alternative is right in the middle of the action alternative that the applicant proposed and the reasonable alternative that we studied. So no big changes there. Eric, anything you would add before I conclude the presentation?
No.
Okay. So with that, we would ask if you have any questions or input on the recommended preferred alternative. And then we would request that you approve it, and just noting as before that the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and pass this recommendation to you for approval. And during that public hearing, there was only one comment from the property owner speaking in favor.
And to add to that too, just to let you know, first of all, I know the first question you're going to ask is, am I going to get the slide deck? Yes, I'll send that out to you. The CD subcommittee met last night and voted unanimously in favor of the preferred alternative as well. Took some convincing of one of the members, but we got there. And there was a lot of feedback that we received through the SEPA comment period from the Harrington Road neighborhood, particularly up in the northern section where where we show some future connections, and they don't want those connections. The concern there was that they would come in and impact their neighborhoods. Staff's recommending that we retain those. Those are future connections that are conceptual at this point. All of the roads that they would connect to are private roads. They're not public roads. People would have to dedicate right of way and go through a big process in order to get to that point to make that functional and feasible. And the time frame of when it would actually get up there and start connecting to those streets is 50+ years away. Just looking at absorption rates and how long it would take to actually get to that point. So something that I don't feel like is that big of a concern for us today, but it does show that we're looking at future connections, which would provide redundancy in the transportation system. It also provide quicker response times for fire and EMS to those neighborhoods, where currently they would have to drive all the way around potentially to get up to serve those neighborhoods. And so there'd be a lot more efficiencies that would be provided to that Harrington Road neighborhood. Understand their concerns. Those are future connections. They're conceptual connections. They may never happen, but we want to at least show that they're there. And if the county, because that's in the county, decides to maybe move forward with that, they would have some planning level work that they could go off of and make future connections for those neighborhoods. As stated previously, the city has been working very closely with the property owner through this. This hasn't been done in a vacuum. We've been working closely with the property owner. We've had multiple outreach with the community. Just a few weeks ago, I was at the Chambers Wednesdays in West, and I had a booth down there. Spent most of the time with people at the booth looking at the preferred alternative and providing feedback, all of which was positive except for one individual who happened to live up off of Harrington Road. Seems like we've been getting a lot of good feedback from the community on this. And as Casey stated, the Planning Commission did hold a public hearing last week and did vote unanimously in favor of the preferred alternative.
Thank you, Eric. With that, we will go ahead and open the public hearing at 5:56. We'll hear from the in-house participants first and then move on to virtual. So from the audience, if you'd wish to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to provide your comments. Anyone in-house? Seeing no one in-house, we will go ahead and move to the virtual world. *9 if your phone, or raise your virtual hand to be recognized. I see no one virtually. Jessica, do you?
I do not.
Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing at 5:56. Motion to approve the Lewis and Clark Ranch Draft Environmental Impact Statement Preferred Alternative. Council, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the preferred alternative for the Lewis and Clark Ranch Draft EIS as presented.
Second.
Question and a second. Council, questions that were not previously addressed in the staff report, either for Casey or Eric? We'll even throw Roscoe into this mix because Water and Sewer does have a little game to play with this. So I see Councilmember Bloom.
Eric, the phase one will probably be, we're talking the 20-year period. But the other phases, they're subject to the normal, these land use designations are subject to change using the comp plan. So much of what we're doing is, this is a picture that's not permanent. And so we're not making a earth-shattering decision for most of the ranch. And everything is subject to change. The one thing that I did notice changed is that the density from the preferred alternative to the previous, what was studied, seems to be much higher as far as population density. And that would seem to drive greater utility needs, Roscoe. Is there an impact of that showing a greater density that hasn't been established or considered in the EIS?
Thanks, Richard. You're spot on with the comment that you made about, after phase one, each of those phases are going to have to go through a very similar process of going through an EIS and planning effort. And so what's there is just setting the table for future, and someone may come and completely rearrange the entire table on us. That's to be determined right down the road.
This is not the first planning for the ranch.
And it won't be the last, I don't believe. So, phase one is probably the most important critical part in paying attention to what's going to happen within that area, that polygon. To answer your question about the density, as Casey stated, it's all of the densities and jobs per household and everything for the preferred alternative are in between the reasonable alternative and what the applicant had submitted. The applicant had submitted one that had much higher numbers. So the numbers that we looked at were based on that. and we've come down off of that with the preferred alternative. We have done significant amount of work on water, sewer, and transportation to make sure that all of those function and work within the Lewis and Clark Ranch. And that's a major driver for why transportation particularly, was a major driver in why we wanted to at least set the table outside of phase one, so we could understand and know what those transportation impacts would be through phase one, because many of those trips would be traveling through phase one. So we didn't end up with too narrow of streets or infrastructure that wasn't big enough to supply the need for those future phases. So we did take a look at all of that, so it does mitigate and take care of all of the increase in densities that's proposed.
So the density of the preferred alternative is less than the original density that the applicant alternative to? It just doesn't feel that way looking at the maps.
Yeah, the applicant's alternative has different color maps. So they have different densities and what compared to what the reasonable analyzed, and then what the preferred came to.
Okay, we'll move with Councilmember Moran.
Yes, thank you. I just was wondering, and I know that it's not within phase one, so it's not hugely important at this point, but when it comes to the possible critical area, I'm just curious why it has it showing as the mixed residential rather than what was on either the initial alternative 3 or any of the others, or am I not remembering the maps correctly?
No, you're correct. So between the reasonable alternative and the preferred alternative, as we stated, we don't know. I mean, that's going to be potentially 100 years away before development starts encroaching up along the top of that plateau. We don't know what the critical area regulations will be at that time. I don't want to speculate on that at this point. So we're just going to leave it alone, put some zoning designation on it, because we don't know if it could be built on. Then there's zoning designation for it and they can plan for that. So we are just basically putting some zoning on there, and future planning efforts can analyze that more intuitively, because they'll have the updated codes of the day. They'll be able to address those things at the time based on what those rules and regulations are.
Okay, I'm just curious because it seems like if it were a critical area that wouldn't be touched, it would make more sense, at least to me, to just consider it park and have like native plant space park. But that, again, like we've been saying, it's close to 100 years from now. So not a hill I'm wanting to die on at all. Just a thing that I'm hoping that we're looking at is all.
It is, and I've had multiple meetings with WDFW on this, and we tried to come to some agreements as far as what would work for everybody. Their expectations on what should happen there were, quite frankly, unrealistic. And so we just said, we'll deal with it in the future then. We're not going to cross this line with them at this point and get to a point where everybody's happy. So there's no impact under this proposal because there's no project out in that area. So again, future planning, they can analyze it, look at it based on future codes and regulations of the day and make that work.
What you just said just makes me curious. If there were to be someone that wanted to build on it before the 50 to 100 years from now, would they be able to, and would that be using this map right here?
If we apply our code today, it would be very difficult for them to, because we still regulate the shrub steppe habitat. And so if they were trying to do that, there would be significant mitigation involved in trying to build something on that hillside.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Smart.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate the meeting we had last night. I wanted to report that I looked on Google Earth and a Walmart takes 1,000 by 1,000 feet. So if you go from their back dock and their drive behind it, all the way out to the edge of their parking lot. That's 1,000 foot square, plus or minus a couple. And this shows the 1 mile strip of commercial sort of going to the northwest. And it's bounded by the multi-use, which then does provide a person with something like 1,000 feet if they so choose to make such a development along there. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. My question is, I didn't get a chance to ask last night. I actually just came up with it. Is the multi-use transition land that is got a 60-40 split between residential and commercial? How firmly does that get applied? I mean, if development comes along and says, well, we really want more residential than commercial in that area, is there a forced reservation for commercial space, or how flexible is that ratio?
It's pretty set because it's based, I mean, we use those numbers to figure out water, sewer, transportation. So if you start to crest over that and get outside of what we studied, it's going to require an addendum to this whole EIS process and analyze, okay, well, now you're doing this other thing and you're changing it, which again, this is a living document, right? At the end of the day, next year we could all come together again and have another powwow and change some of the colors, because it's just what planning is. It's what we do. So it would need to look at the incremental increase of impact based upon what they're proposing. So if it's not covered, consider it like an insurance policy. This planned action ordinance is like an insurance policy that's going to look at all of the impacts associated with, and I found the numbers, Richard, and I'll get back to Mr. Bloom. I'll get back to you on those. But it looks at that and says, okay, you're covered to have all of this development happen. And each time a new development comes in, they fill out a SEPA checklist and says, okay, here's what we're doing. And then we bounce those numbers off of what we've analyzed and say, okay, yes, it's concurrent with this existing plan, and that project can move forward based on the approvals of this plan. If it's outside of that, then we have to go back through and reopen it, have a review for what those additional impacts are, and then make an addendum to it with those additional impact mitigating measures, saying, okay, well, now you've got to do X, Y, Z because yours wasn't covered with the original insurance plan.
Thank you. The other thing I'll just point out to my fellow council members is that I have a concern about creating a Road 68 sort of condition with a mile of commercial all in a row like this. But I also think that's an efficient way to lay it out. And my concern would be that people can drive to their homes, without having to negotiate that. And this plan has these other roads coming up from the south, 2 of them shown right now, and maybe there would be more, I don't know, that would allow people to sort of bypass that whole mile strip, which is going to be filled, I'm sure, with stoplights and traffic, assuming it built out like this, without maybe having to negotiate that. So that was one of the things I want to point out. It's a plus for this. And I also want to point out that I'm the council member that had a hard time agreeing to this, and it wasn't because of this plan for this phase 1. This phase 1 looks relatively reasonable to me. I would like to see less concentrated stretches of what could be like apartment buildings, because you also have about a mile of what could be apartments or condos, whereas it could have gotten broken up a little more. But I'm sure that it'll be broken up by development demands and whatever the market wants. The rest of the plan, especially how it's been amended, there's actually 4 miles of what could be high density housing when you go out. And that, I understand that's the 50 to 100 year plan or whatever, and I'm not concerned about it today, but I want to point out that I have some misgivings about the large segments of high density that are out there. And that would really very much change. Well, we wouldn't be the West Richland we are today, and I don't think we're going to stay that way. But It doesn't even come close. So I just want to point out that I'm not, I've got a lot of convincing to do for the rest of this 50-year plan when it comes around. Which I may not be here for that, but nevertheless, it's this little first phase, it looks like it has an appropriate mix of commercial and residential. And I appreciate the fact also as a positive point that and for our audience, that the yellow sections, the mixed residential. So I've been told that is equivalent to like an RM6 or RM10. Is that not correct?
Yeah, RM6 and RM10 would be typical types that would be built in there, maybe even smaller lots. We haven't really completely determined those yet, but we'll be bringing all of that detail to you in a council meeting soon to come.
So it's important to me that you can have residential neighborhoods that are not all apartment buildings in this layout, and it looks like there's the potential for an abundance of what I would call what the average house in West Richland looks like today could be built in this section. So I'm going to again approve this, and I appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Eric?
respond to Mr. Bloom's comment that he made earlier? I found the numbers for him. So under alternative 2, which was the applicant's original submittal, phase 1 would accommodate 2,937 jobs and 3,926 housing units over 20 years. The preferred alternative would accommodate 2,684 jobs, so about 300-ish less, and about 3,795 housing units. So again, another couple 150 less on housing than
Wow.
what was analyzed on alternative 2.
I wasn't talking about just phase 1. I was talking about the overall project, whether that had, I mean, that's where I see higher density.
I got those numbers too. So the overall would accommodate 20,327 under alternative 2, which was what the applicant submitted. So that's jobs, 20,327 jobs, and 33,879 housing units. The preferred alternative is 19,586 jobs, so a little less than 1,000 less, and then 31,377 housing units, so about 1,500 less.
Thank you. It just optics is what comes in. And those lines are not very distinctly drawn, correct?
Thank you for the explanation there, Eric, of Councilmember Bloom's question. Council, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, council. Appreciate it. So we will go ahead and move on to our citizen public comment. If you'd like to provide comments to the council, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And as a reminder, there's no dialogue between the speaker, presenter, or to the council. So anybody in-house, we'll start in-house comments. Seeing none in-house. Go ahead and come up to the podium. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Desiree Ashley. I'm at 6255 Teak Lane. I noticed that you commented quite a bit on the reduction of the park size as relative to the housing units and commercial density. I didn't realize or wasn't aware of what the actual size of that park is based on scaling of the map, just in relative looking at the area, it looks like it's very small. And I understood there was a connection park pathway that may connect that to other parks, but I still think it should be a little bit larger for that many people.
Anyone else in-house? Seeing no one, I'll look to the virtual world. *9 if you're by phone, or raise your virtual hand to be recognized. Seeing none virtually. Jessica, do you?
No, I do not.
So if anybody'd like to have any further conversation with Mr. Mendenhall when we're done with our meeting this evening, I'm sure that he's open for a evening of entertainment. So with that, I will conclude our meeting at 6:15. Thank you, council.